Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth lecture in chapter 12. In this lecture, we're going to take a look at Japan. In particular, we're going to look at feudalism in Japan, or that feudal period in Japanese history. We won't come back to Japan for a while after this one, so please make sure you focus on what are the main traits going on during this period in Japan, but we will come back to it here in the second half of the course, specifically in chapter 19, and we can kind of connect those two in terms of what's happening from this period um, to the later periods of Japanese history. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so Japan, just like we've kind of done with many different cultures in this class, whether it was like looking at Russia or um, the steppe, where many people like the Mongols or the Turks or the Huns came from, we have to look at the geography of Japan to really gain an understanding of how the cultures developed or how the ways of life developed um, in Japan. As you guys know, Japan is an island nation. We mostly look at it, and there's the four main islands of Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu. But really, there's over 4,000 islands that make up this entire archipelago that is Japan. Now, there are some advantages to the climate and the structure of the island system for Japan. There's a very mild climate there, so it's pretty easy in terms to live there. It doesn't get too cold or too hot, and there's a lot of rainfall, so you can have very fertile lands and allow for a significant population to grow. Also, because of the islands themselves, and the fact that it is not connected to the mainland, it means that Japan is pretty well protected from invasion. However, even though it's separated, it's protected from invasion, and that's a significant distance for that, it's not significant enough that you can't bring in the benefits from the mainland of Asia and get the cultural traits and diffusion coming over to them. So they're close enough for diffusion, but far enough away to be protected from invasion. Now, there are some disadvantages. Because they're islands, because all across the Pacific Rim and have been built over millions of years through tectonic shifts and eruptions and so forth, Japan is very mountainous. So it can be very difficult to get around. It also means that living space can be very, very limited, and resources are actually quite scarce because of the development of the geological development of the islands. You have a lot of certain resources like timber, but you might not have other resources. So you need to look out and trade with other cultures or have contact with other cultures to get goods that you need. This actually will become a huge issue later on in Japan's history, specifically in the case of World War II, and why Japan really expands across specific areas, because they lack resources for a modern industrial country. But that's for another time, and so forth. Because they're on the Pacific Rim, there's a lot of earthquakes in this area. So weather and natural events can actually be a huge problem. Typhoons that are brought up by earthquakes, tidal waves that are brought up by earthquakes, typhoons moving through the area because of the currents and so forth. Typhoons are just the eastern hemisphere's version of hurricanes, if you guys want to know. So they can hit very hard, and we've seen that actually in recent years with tidal waves, a tsunami hitting Japan and so forth years ago, and earthquakes causing problems for Japan, and this has been kind of going throughout their history. All right, so here are the four main islands of Japan, as well as some other ones, but this is typically what we look at as Japan. Just want to kind of have you guys remind you of that. All right, so early Japan was controlled by hundreds of different clans. There was no one group that was in control. And we'll see some maps here moving forward. You guys will definitely look at one when we look at chapter 19 section on Japan and how more it was split up. And then you have to think of it and compare this to kind of what's going to go on in Europe in terms of the feudal age. Think of like the clans and the feudal states in Europe being a comparison here. And these clans worship their own gods in ways of life. And basically what this did is these Japanese customs formed what we call the Shinto, or the way of the gods. And basically the Japanese followed the custom of that you respected nature and you respected your family in the present day, but really you respected your ancestors and you tried to do right by them. And they believed in what was known as the kami, or the divine spirits of nature. Think of it as like, to give you guys like a pop cultural comparison, if you guys are familiar with Harry Potter, and like the Patronus, you're like the spirit animal type of deal. This is kind of the similarity here, what the kami was in the Japanese Shinto way of life. Now, in the 400s, the Yamato clan gains the upper hand and control across the Japanese islands. They don't have full control, but they're kind of the dominant clan, and they set up a system using what they call a dual government. They actually have two emperors that are set up here. So you have all these different clans that are supposed to answer to the two emperors that effectively kind of quote unquote rule Japan. You have one emperor that really rules as a figurehead, and then you have one that actually has the controlling interest or controlling power. All right, so let's talk about Japanese culture. Japan, and you guys need to star this, remember it, take note on this, for not only several questions that you guys are going to, and activities that you're going to do for the test and just kind of formative activities, but for essays too, is that Japan is going to have a real close linked tradition in terms of the development of their culture with China. So, as well as Korea and so forth. So, Japan, as things move forward, they actually gained Buddhism from Korea, which had moved to Korea from China, and then had moved to China from really Southeast Asia and India. So as Buddhism comes into Japan, they start to mix the Shinto rituals that many of the various clans in Japan were practicing with Buddhism. It was actually, they worked very well together. Think of it in terms of how we talked about how Islam mixed with a lot of the traditions of the various people they came into contact with like a lot of the African traditions under animism and so forth, and like the East Coast region mixed well with Islam. Same thing here. The Shinto rituals are mixing well with Buddhism. Furthermore, one of the you want to know why the Japanese form of writing looks very similar to the Chinese form of writing? It's because they borrowed that from the Chinese and put their own spin on it. So it's different. It's actually quite different, but very similar in its own way as well. Also, in terms of, you look at the art in Japan versus the art in China, specifically from these periods, you look at it and go, well, these look very similar. They are, for that reason. The Japanese love that form of art. Now, the big difference, though, is that if you look at Japanese art and Chinese art, typically the Japanese art is going to be more colorful, with the Chinese more focusing on just using black ink and not using colors as much. There's also similar in terms of looking at their living styles as well. And the form of a kind of the using of a strong central government was something that was adopted from the Chinese as well. Because think about it, Japan is a variety of islands, all these different clans, but the Yamato are able to set up a strong system of central government while not actually maintaining control over everyone. So they're able to get the central government that people kind of different clans follow. So you see this mixture of traditions and mixture of traits and stuff that are going to be adapted, and the Japanese will put their own spin on them as we go through history. Now, in the late 9th century, however, Japan is actually going to cut ties with China because they don't necessarily agree with what's going on with the Tang Chinese dynasty at the time, and this is actually going to lead to a period of decline for a little bit of period. Now, we need to talk about, if we're talking about feudal Japan, we have to talk about the Heian period. If you guys want to know a little bit more about the Heian period outside of what we talk about just here briefly in this lecture, in this course, go to Crash Course. world history, they've got a great video that talks about Heian Japan that adds more insight not only into that period, but kind of helps with understanding the cultural traits and ways of life of the Japanese during this time. So in the late 700s, the Japanese moved their capital um, to Heian, what we would consider modern day Kyoto, and the nobility form a court society. So it's a more developed central form under the nobility, um, and they live by a very strict set of rules and rituals. And this can be important because this idea of strict following of rules and rituals is going to kind of progress itself through Japanese history or culture, even to this day. They follow very strict sets of rules and traditions. It's very important to them. Now, there's a strong effort during the Heian period because there's a lot of advancement going on to push cultural advancements. In particular, poetry and painting are very prevalent during this period. You actually get the world's first novel that we actually focus on. It's called The Tale of Genji, that is developed during this period. And from there, we're going to have millions of novels to be written up to this day and will continue to be written. All right, so the feudal system in Japan has its benefits, but it also really kind of has its drawbacks. Kind of think about what we talk about with in terms of the European feudal system, where it kind of helped protect people from the problems and raidings from like people like the Vikings and Huns, but it led to kind of segmentation and breaking up of Europe and kind of leading to the Dark Ages and allowing that to extend. It does the same thing in Japan. Landowners and clan leaders that have more power than others, as well as control over areas, maybe a whole island or a significant portion of an island, weaken the entirety of the Japanese government's power, or the emperor's power. I can't say Japanese government because they're not a nation in this instance, but you guys get what I'm talking about. So they actually weaken the power of the government or the emperor by really maintaining de facto control or de facto sovereignty over their area. So the clans end up creating their own private armies to protect and extend their power. And essentially what this does is it creates a lawless countryside filled with danger in a broad sense. Think of it in terms of like comparing it with the feudal system in Europe again. Think of it like in terms of knights doing the same thing in Europe. They have their own, or nobles have their own private armies led by knights and so forth, and it can kind of cause wars and violence across the countryside. Same thing going on here in Japan. Furthermore, you also have to worry about, because it's an island nation, and people are always going to be looking for the best of their abilities to take economic advantages. You have raiders that are going to take advantage of this weakened government control, as well as the fact that they can easily slip away to different islands or through different inlets and so forth. They use the sea. So piracy is going to be a big problem. So all this does is this leads lords to create their own set of bodyguards. And this is where the samurai actually get their birth. Compare samurai with European knights in this case and why they're developed. And the samurai, as we know, they're very, very strong, fabled set of warriors that are very skilled. And primarily the reason why the samurai are going to be able to become these famed warriors is because of the warrior culture that's developed in Japan, the environment that's going on, and then you have to add in the fact that the traditions in Japan under Shinto is that you live this very strict way of life to certain rules, and that's a big deal because you have people that are very familiar with following rituals to the T, and then the samurai developed what's known as the Bushido code, and they follow it, and it gives them this very disciplined body to protect the lords and so forth. Now, we have the Kamakura Shogunate. The Kamakura Shogunate is going to take control in the late 1100s. as the clans fight for power, the Minamoto clan wins and establishes this shogunate. Now this is important because their leader, Yoritomo, he's going to be named what's going to be known as the shogun, or military dictator. Now he's going to be military dictator or shogun along with the emperor. So you're going to have this vying for power between the emperor and the shogun for a long period of time. And he establishes the Kamakura shogunate, and this shogunate's going to last until that vying for power erupts into a war between those that support the emperor and those that support the shogunate, and the imperial forces will win in 1868. So, and we'll talk about that much later in this course in chapter 19. Now, the Kamakura shogunate is going to be in power in Japan when Kublai Khan and the Mongols try to invade, and they defeat them, more because of luck, because of weather, which is where the idea of kamikaze is going to come from, the divine wind that damages the Mongol fleet. But ultimately, the Kamakura shogunate is going to lose prestige over the years, and the samurai are going to be attached to the local leaders, like we talked about in the last slide, and you're still going to have bitter warfare that's going to take place between the various clans. Again, we looked at this piece of artwork in the last lecture. This is just, again, showing you Japanese form of art. You can see it's more colorful than the Chinese here, and this is depicting the Japanese fighting off the Mongols. All right, I believe, yep, that's everything that I've got for you, and we're kind of leaving it off here, which in Japanese history, we kind of cut it off with the Kamakura shogunate because we don't want to go too much into detail about the development of history for Japan yet. We'll do that later as the Age of Exploration takes place. Realistically, for this, just to review, you need to remember the feudal way of life, kind of what are the benefits and really kind of the drawbacks for Japan in the feudal system, kind of creating that warrior class, the samurai, and the kind of having warring periods going on in the split rulership between the emperor and the shogun. That's all I got for you today on Japan. Like I said, we'll touch a lot more on this and be more specific on Japanese culture and history in chapter 19. Have a good one.